Hey everybody, welcome to Visual Communication to Media. My name is Adam Roseski. It's a pleasure to see each and every one of you. I'm so excited to have you all here today. I'm really blessed to have it and really get off on some really good notes. So this week, we're really going to start talking about perceptual communication. As last week, we talked a lot about sensory communication, how it really ties into a lot of different aspects, how everything plays a part with the responses and the visuals. This week, we're going to talk about visuals that trigger perceptual responses and how they deal with cognitive memories, cultures, cultural familiarity, and a lot of different aspects about target audience. And that's really what we're going to focus on this week. So let's talk a little bit about perception with cultures and go from there. So yeah, let's do that. So yeah, culture perception, understanding cultures is important because it's to relay visual messages to different groups of people easily without confusion or offending certain groups. That's where cultural familiar elements come into play when you're trying to create visuals. And this is usually centered around four different aspects, centered around origin, where you're from, locationally, social, who you hang out with, who you like to hang out with based on activity, religion, like who do you worship, if that's another thing that you have in your society, and in family. Even family cultures is really crucial. I think it even goes down to like certain elements to where even like certain families have different ways. Like if you go to somebody's house when you were a kid and you were used to like putting the dishes a certain way, and then this family's like, no, we do it this way. That's a family culture right there. And that's something to keep in mind with. It may not be your culture, but you still have to respect it because it's their own way of doing things. And that's something to keep in mind with. And yeah, so perception kind of lies with a lot of different things. And it's kind of interesting because they're developed by things known as culture codes. And culture codes are really important. They're developed by a French theorist known as Claude Raphael. They're meant to understand the different types of culture, unique cultural features encoded in some form of information to identify the culture. Now, the funny thing about it is these codes are cultural interpretations of what we see that each person learns from birth. And that's really important because a lot of times it's rare to notice these codes. And we tend to learn a lot of these codes within like the first 0 to 4 years of your life because you really can't argue with it, but you kind of interpret it like, oh, this is how these people do things, so I'm going to do things that way. And that's technically how that works. So it's really interesting because of the fact that when you're growing up, you pick up these cultures that you don't realize that these are certain cultures that go around in the world today and in your area and things that you live by. That's why a lot of people, when they don't leave their area, are kind of amazed that other people do things the way they do because it's what they've grown up learning. Like, oh my gosh, you guys do these things this way. It's just really impressive. It's rare to know these codes. They're learned inherently. It's something to keep in mind with. Now, culture codes can be imposed upon by Raphael 4 different ways. And it's kind of interesting that it follows the same 4 different types of cultures that we talked about in the last slide. He said they focus on a cultural and social perspective, specific geographical country perspective. Now note, cultural and social perspective, that's the social cultures. The geographical location perspective is what type of country. Specific location, like what type of city you're from, maybe more interior location than that instead of religion, and then a family perspective. So instead of religion, he had like 2 different styles of locations, like an outer area and then an inner area of the culture, but that's where he gets them from. Now, culture codes are used in visual communication and become culturally familiar with us, and which in turn can be used strategically to connect with us. And so if we as visual communicators find out what these culture codes are, we can utilize them in our own visuals to make the messages clear to the people we're trying to send a message to. And that's important. For example, let's take a look at 2 messages that businesses try to do this. Now, businesses and culture need to emotionally connect with potential clients and supporters. And usually culturally familiar visuals will heighten the emotional cognitive engagement of viewers. And it is important to remember that these visual elements are culturally familiar to many different cultures. Now, really interesting aspect about this is these are 2, and this is a good example right here. These are 2 Christmas advertisements of Coca-Cola back in the 90s, both to Latin American countries. One was to Argentina, the other was to Mexico. Note, same style of language, everything's the exact same, same exact concept, except there's only one different image, is the reindeer versus the Santa Claus. Now, the Santa Claus is put on there because Santa's like a big thing in Mexican culture. Like, he's a really highlighted element of Christmas compared to like Argentina. So even though Santa's big over there too, just not as big as he is like in Mexican cultures. So that's why he's on there in the Mexican area compared to an Argentinian culture. And that's something to keep in mind with as well. Just because certain cultures speak different same languages doesn't mean they're different all in themselves. For example, if somebody speaks a Latin American language, a Spanish language, like in Cuba compared to Colombia, both of those cultures are completely different, even though they speak the same language. And the funny thing about it is they have different dialects, so the way they even hear the language is sometimes different. For example, we have the same thing in English as well. The differences between a northeastern dialect from, Boston, and that's even different compared to Northeast, compared to New York versus Boston. That's a different style of dialect itself and on its own. Same thing with like Texas versus California. There's just so many different dialects around the English culture, and that's something to keep aware of. And that's something that you need to notice, that if you're marketing specifically to people in Texas, you need to do that. So you might see a little bit more cowboy hats and some, cultures of football being thrown around there compared to, maybe some that's more relaxing. Like in the North, you might see more hockey culture that's put up there. There's a lot of different things you can do that. And you tie your image based upon the culture of familiar elements that resound within the culture that you're trying to trigger. That's a big thing. All right, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're going to focus on that this week. A lot of good elements about that. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. Other than that, be safe, have fun, enjoy. Do keep in mind, lecture is posted on the announcements. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Also, the rubrics are up as well in the announcements. Other than that, I'll take a look at your grades. Be safe, have fun, enjoy, and I'll see everybody later this week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.